Come visit Chitwan National Park, which lies in Nepal's subtropical Terai lowlands at the south of the country. Its dense jungle, marshy wetlands and rippling grasslands are a haven to wildlife. On our tour, we will explore this beautiful and enchanting habitat by jeep and canoe, as well as visiting local indigenous communities.
Neoliberal conservation describes a dynamic wherein prominent organisations around the world concerned with biodiversity protection have increasingly adopted strategies and mechanisms that seek to reconcile conservation with economic development by harnessing economic markets as putative mechanisms for financing nature conservation.
WWF is a global conservation organisation who aim to stop the degradation of the natural environment and create a future in which people live in harmony with nature. In 1967, the WWF launched its first conservation programme in Nepal, and by 1993 they had established a permanent presence in the country. The case study we will draw upon highlights the prominence of the WWF in neoliberal conservation and the tensions that have arisen related to their involvement.
Chitwan National Park in Nepal is a key example where neoliberal conservation has been observed, in which conservation has been partly funded by the United States Agency for International Development. The park is a World Heritage Site, with the UNESCO website centralising the non-human in their description of the park. Here's success for the non-human has been praised as a result of conservation. For example, it has been evidence that the park has seen significant gains in species diversity and population sizes.
It is also important to consider the human players in this narrative. The park was created in the Terai region, which is predominantly home to many indigenous groups, including the Tharu people.
And we are Brahmins at least, with higher caste and other ethnic groups.
As Nepal operates under a caste system, which is reinforced within the park's practices, certain groups experience exploitation, while others amass greater benefits from the existence of the park. The Tharu people, for example, are often the object of the tourist gaze, whilst other groups that lie within other caste systems, such as Brahmin and Khatri, are often tour guides who have some control over tourist expectations and destinations. This highlights the power fields in play, with different indigenous groups experiencing the national park differently. This shows how the many communities are not homogeneous and disparities can occur throughout due to the varying power structures and hierarchies. The National Parks and Wildlife Conservation Act 1973, formed under the autocratic government, has yet to be amended. The Act doesn't require any provision of compensation or relocation, furthering the marginalisation and suppression of Indigenous voices, with the government retaining ultimate power over the human and non-human actors. For the Tharu people, this has resulted in their dispossession from lands, resources and ways of life by armed Royal Nepal Army soldiers. This forced relocation, according to MacLean, left behind their dignity, identity and respect for nature in the form of their village god, showcasing the devaluation of Indigenous ontologies. This is a form of slow violence where cultural erosion occurs within conservation.
The transformation of local populations into supposed criminals can be seen in the conservation area, where dispossession has further tensions. Shikha Ram Chowdhury was working on his land when he was arrested on suspicion of poaching rhinos by park rangers. He was later beaten and died in hospital. This is one of the many examples which triggered a report in 2020 into the role of the WWF in relation to human rights abuses. In addition, historically subsistent practices such as cutting grass and grazing livestock have been made illegal in large swathes of the park. These forms of violence can be traced back to colonial conservation, where sovereignty was claimed by colonial powers over wildlife, transforming, as expressed by Steinhardt, indigenous hunters into criminal poachers. These tensions occurring in Chitwan reflect what Devine and Ojeda term spatial fetishism, where the depiction of space, as seen by tourists, is disconnected from the violent reality local and indigenous people face.
One of the integral aspects of neoliberal conservation is the commodification of both the human and the non-human, allowing Chitwan National Park to receive the largest number of tourists of any of the national parks in Nepal. Conserved non-human nature is arranged to align with finance-generating practices, reducing the costs of conservation by putting revenue generation to the market. In the context of Chitwan National Park, human actors are also commodified for revenue generation through tourism. The park relies heavily on the commodification of local culture and heritage. The identities of local indigenous people have become the focus of the tourist gaze, with tattoos worn by the Tharu women and the stick dances of the Tharu people being of great interest to tourists. This is a form of primitive accumulation, integral to the capitalist strategy where the bodies and identities of the Tharu people are transformed to the commodity form. The Tharu culture is simultaneously suppressed and appropriated for financial benefit. To conclude, conservation practices within the park were intended to improve sustainability, but instead of protecting the interests of Indigenous Tharu people, have reinforced issues of racism associated with the existing caste system. These conflicting interests and different voices create epistemological violence, whereby the value ascribed to the human and non-human lies in their ability to produce revenue.